Welcome to Dead Rail's class tier list. Best classes to use, ROBLOX, the ultimate guide to finding the strongest class in the game. If you've ever wondered which class will help you survive longer, dominate lobbies, and have the most fun, then this is the video for you. In Dead Rails, picking the right class can be the difference between wiping out enemies effortlessly or struggling to stay alive. Some classes are insanely overpowered, while others, well, let's just say you're better off avoiding them. Today, we're ranking them all so you know exactly which ones are worth using. Before we jump into the Dead Rails class tier list, make sure to like and subscribe, it seriously helps out the channel, and if we hit 100 likes, I'll drop another Dead Rails guide soon. Maybe a weapons tier list or even advanced gameplay tips, let me know what you'd want to see next. Also, drop a comment below, what's your favorite class in Dead Rails? Do you think we got the rankings right, or would you place them differently? I'll be reading and replying to as many as I can. Alright, let's kick things off with B tier. These are the classes that are decent but not amazing, they can hold their own, but they have weaknesses that keep them from reaching the top. Let's break them down. B tier, Ironclad. Kicking off B tier, we have Ironclad, a class built for survivability and tanking damage. If you're the type of player who prefers standing your ground, absorbing hits, and outlasting enemies, this class is a solid choice. For 100 bonds, you become an Ironclad player, gaining access to a full set of armor, including a helmet, chest plate, left shoulder armor, and right shoulder armor, along with a shovel as your starting weapon. Strengths of Ironclad. The biggest strength of Ironclad is its insane durability. The armor lets you withstand way more damage than most other classes, making it much harder to be taken down in gunfights. This makes Ironclad perfect for holding defensive positions, protecting teammates, or surviving ambushes. In a game where a few well-placed shots can take you out, that extra layer of defense is a huge advantage. Another plus is that Ironclad doesn't require scavenging for armor, unlike other classes. Right from the start, you have protection that most players will need to search for, putting you one step ahead when the fight begins. Weaknesses of Ironclad. However, Ironclad comes with a massive trade-off. Movement speed is reduced by 20% due to the heavy armor. This is a big deal in Dead Rails, where speed and positioning are key. Whether you're trying to escape an ambush, chase down enemies, or reposition in a firefight, that speed reduction makes everything harder. This weakness becomes especially noticeable in close-range fights. If you're up against fast-moving classes that can strafe, dodge, and reposition quickly, you'll find yourself struggling to keep up. Since your starting weapon is just a shovel, you're also at a disadvantage in ranged combat until you can find better weapons. Why Ironclad is B tier overall. Ironclad is a solid but situational class. The extra defense is great, but the lack of mobility holds it back from being a top-tier choice. In the right hands and the right situations, it can be extremely strong, especially if you're playing defensively or in team-based scenarios. However, if you prefer fast, aggressive gameplay, this class will feel too slow and clunky. That's why Ironclad lands in B tier, strong and tanky, but not versatile enough to be a top pick. A tier, Doctor. Kicking off A tier, we have Doctor, one of the most valuable support classes in Dead Rails. While other classes focus on damage, defense, or mobility, Doctor is all about keeping you and your teammates alive, which can often be the deciding factor between victory and defeat. For just 15 bonds, this class is incredibly cheap and accessible, making it one of the best budget picks in the game. Players who choose Doctor spawn in with a small black bowler's hat and, more importantly, 2 bandages and 2 snake oils, allowing them to heal up quickly or support their teammates in a fight. Strengths of Doctor. The biggest advantage of Doctor is its healing ability. While most players are forced to rely on scavenged medical supplies, Doctors start with healing items right away, giving them a massive edge in early game fights. On top of that, they have a unique ability. They can sacrifice half of their HP to heal another player without using a bandage. This makes them incredibly valuable in team-based fights, as they can keep their squad alive even when supplies are low. Another key strength is cost efficiency. At just 15 bonds, Doctor is one of the cheapest classes in the game, meaning you can pick it up almost every match without worrying about running out of bonds. Weaknesses of Doctor. The main downside of Doctor is its lack of combat advantages. You don't get any armor or special weapons, just a shovel, meaning you're heavily reliant on finding better gear before getting into fights. This makes Doctor a risky choice for solo players, as you'll have to outplay opponents with superior equipment. Additionally, while the ability to sacrifice HP to heal others is useful, it can also be a double-edged sword. If you're not careful, you could end up putting yourself in a vulnerable position while trying to save a teammate. Why Doctor is A tier? Doctor earns its spot in A tier because of its incredible value in team play. The ability to heal teammates, start with medical supplies, and do it all for just 15 bonds makes it one of the most cost-effective and impactful classes in the game. However, its lack of armor and weak starting weapon prevent it from reaching S tier, as it struggles in direct combat. If you're playing in a coordinated team, Doctor is one of the strongest picks available. But if you're running solo, you'll need to be extra careful with your engagements. A tier. The Alamo. Next in A tier, we have the Alamo, a defensive powerhouse that excels at fortifying the train and protecting teammates. While Ironclad is focused on self-survivability, the Alamo's strength lies in its ability to lock down key positions and create barriers that make it harder for enemies to push forward. For 50 bonds, the Alamo spawns with a helmet for basic protection, a shovel, 3 metal sheets, and 3 barbed wire. This setup allows players to reinforce choke points, slow down enemy advances, and create cover, making it one of the best choices for holding defensive positions. Strengths of the Alamo. The main advantage of the Alamo is its fortification ability. The metal sheets can be used to block entrances, create cover, or reinforce vulnerable areas, while the barbed wire forces enemies to slow down or take an alternative route. This makes Alamo incredibly useful for controlling key areas of the train, especially in team-based matches. Another strength is that the Alamo doesn't suffer from mobility penalties like Ironclad, meaning you can still move freely while setting up defenses. Unlike classes that rely on scavenging for protection, Alamo starts with everything it needs to fortify an area from the moment the game begins. Weaknesses of the Alamo. However, the Alamo isn't built for direct combat. While it does have a helmet, it lacks the full-body armor of Ironclad, meaning it's not nearly as tanky. On top of that, it only spawns with a shovel, so unless you find better weapons early on, you'll struggle in one-on-one fights. Additionally, the Alamo is situational. It shines when holding down a position, but if the match is fast-paced or your team is constantly moving, it becomes much harder to take advantage of the class's strengths. Why the Alamo is A tier? The Alamo earns its spot in A tier due to its ability to change the pace of a fight. A well-placed Alamo player can completely shut down enemy advances, create strong defensive positions, and protect their team. However, its lack of direct combat advantages means it's not an all-around class that works in every situation. If you enjoy playing defensively and controlling key areas, the Alamo is one of the best choices available. But if you prefer aggressive, high-mobility gameplay, you may find it too passive. S tier, Arsonist. Finally, coming in hot, we have the Arsonist, one of the most chaotic and dangerous classes in Dead Rails. If you enjoy setting everything ablaze, causing destruction, and watching enemies burn, then this class is for you. For just 20 bonds, the Arsonist comes equipped with a scorched cowboy hat and an affiliation with fire, meaning you deal double fire damage. You also start with 4 Molotovs and a shovel, giving you immediate access to one of the most devastating area denial tools in the game. Strengths of Arsonist. The biggest advantage of Arsonist is its fire-based damage output. Fire is already a lethal mechanic in Dead Rails, but with this class, you double its effectiveness. A single well-placed Molotov can wipe out multiple enemies, cut off escape routes, and force opponents into bad positions. If you play smart, you can control entire sections of the train by making certain areas too dangerous to enter. Another huge strength is that Molotovs completely ignore armor. Unlike bullets, which are affected by helmets and body protection, fire burns through everything. This makes Arsonist an amazing counter to tankier classes like Ironclad, as their heavy armor won't save them from the flames. Additionally, at just 20 bonds, Arsonist is incredibly cheap for how strong it is. You don't need to spend a ton of resources to get a class that can dominate fights and control the battlefield. Weaknesses of Arsonist. Despite its incredible offensive power, Arsonist does have some drawbacks. First, it lacks defensive capabilities. You don't start with any armor, meaning if you get caught without cover, you're vulnerable to gunfire. Second, Molotovs require precision and strategy. If you throw them poorly, you might miss your target or even set yourself on fire. Unlike guns, which allow for quick and precise damage, Molotovs require good positioning and timing. Lastly, fire can be unpredictable. It spreads in ways you can't always control, and in tight spaces like the train, you could accidentally trap yourself or your teammates if you're not careful. Why Arsonist is S tier. Despite its few weaknesses, Arsonist is an absolute powerhouse. Double fire damage, for Molotovs at spawn, and the ability to ignore armor make it one of the strongest offensive classes in the game. It's also one of the most cost-efficient at just 20 bonds, giving you insane value for a small investment. If you're a player who thrives on aggression, chaos, and battlefield control, Arsonist is hands down one of the best classes you can pick. That's why it lands firmly in S tier. Devastating, cheap, and capable of taking over an entire game in the right hands.